Welcome back to PHCodal channel. Okay, I want you to imagine a scenario with me for a second. Can a town mayor, a local chief executive, actually get slapped with a criminal conviction just for feeding hungry calamity victims? I know it sounds totally contradictory, right? I mean, you'd think helping people in a major crisis is basically the dictionary definition of good public service. But as we're going to see, the law, especially when we're talking about public funds and property, has some incredibly strict boundaries. So today, we are diving deep into this exact, really fascinating paradox by unpacking a landmark Supreme Court case, Ysidoro v. People, from November 14, 2012.
To break this explainer down quickly and efficiently, we're going to use the FIRE method. We'll look at 1, the facts, 2, the core legal issues, 3, the Supreme Court's ruling, and 4, the rationale and reasoning behind it all.
Okay, let's jump right in. Part 1, the facts. A diversion of goods.
So, check out the stark contrast between the original intent and the actual use here. Mayor Ysidoro was in charge of some public property, specifically, literally just 4 sacks of rice and 2 boxes of sardines. Now, these specific goods were officially appropriated for a supplemental feeding program targeting malnutrition. But then, a calamity hits the town. People are suddenly left without food while they're trying to rebuild their homes. Seeing this massive, immediate need, Mayor Ysidoro makes a call. He approves the diversion of those exact 4 sacks of rice and 2 boxes of sardines away from the malnutrition program and hands them straight to the calamity victims. I mean, on a human level, it totally looks like a noble act of crisis management, doesn't it?
Well, the Office of the Ombudsman for the Visayas absolutely did not see it that way. They saw it as a straight-up violation of the law. They actually accused him of the illegal use of public property, a crime known as technical malversation. So the case goes all the way up to the Sandigan Bayan, which is the Special Appellate Collegial Court in the Philippines. And on February 8, 2010, the court found Mayor Ysidoro guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But here's the wild part. Noting the very unique circumstances that he was just trying to help and cause zero actual damage or embarrassment to public service, they didn't throw him in jail. Instead, they fined him exactly 1,698 pesos. That is exactly 50% of the misapplied sum. Pretty wild, right?
Moving right along to Part 2, the issue, core legal questions.
So, understandably, Mayor Ysidoro felt that getting a criminal record for feeding calamity victims was pretty unjust, so he appealed this all the way to the Supreme Court. And the absolute central issue this whole case hinges on is this: is good faith a valid defense for technical malversation? Ysidoro's argument was basically, look, my intentions were completely noble here. I wasn't lining my own pockets, I wasn't stealing a dime, I acted in absolute 100% good faith to help suffering people in my own municipality. He was essentially asking the highest court in the land, is there really a way you can be criminally liable if your intent was solely to serve the public good? Which brings us to Part 3, the ruling. The Supreme Court decides.
The Supreme Court's answer? Swift and definitive. They affirmed the Sandigan Bayan's decision in its entirety. The conviction stands. Mayor Ysidoro was officially deemed guilty of technical malversation, completely irregardless of his good intentions and the honestly minuscule amount of food involved here.
Let's look at exactly why they did that in Part 4, the rationale, the law behind the verdict. Okay, to really understand how doing something objectively good for your community can land you a criminal conviction, we have to look strictly at the mechanics of the law. Under Article 220 of the Revised Penal Code, the crime of technical malversation has 3 very strict, totally non-negotiable elements. First, the offender has to be an accountable public officer. As mayor, Ysidoro obviously checked that box. Second, the officer applies public funds or property under his administration to some public use. And hey, feeding calamity victims is definitely a public use. Third, and this is the absolute trap right here, the public use for which the property was applied is entirely different from the purpose for which it was originally appropriated by law. Those rice and sardines were legally set aside for malnutrition, not calamity relief. Boom. All 3 elements were met perfectly.
Now, Mayor Ysidoro tried to argue that he was simply using savings to augment another urgent need, but the Supreme Court shut this down fast by pointing to a really fundamental principle of government, the power of the purse. You see, this power is vested exclusively in the local legislative body, the Sanggunian. The law strictly requires an official ordinance to actually determine if savings have accrued and to legally authorize any augmentation of other budget items. Basically, an executive officer, even the mayor, just cannot unilaterally bypass the legislative body to divert goods. It doesn't matter how great his intentions are, the separation of powers just has to be respected.
Oh, and there was also this super fascinating procedural hiccup in the case. Ysidoro kept claiming that the municipal auditor actually found nothing irregular with his actions at the time and argued that this alone should clear him. But here's the thing. During the actual trial at the Sandigan Bayan, Ysidoro totally failed to present this municipal auditor as a witness to testify on his behalf. The court pointed out a very strict rule of evidence here. Basically, if you claim to have access to a witness who could supposedly clear your name, but you don't actually put them on the stand during trial, the legal presumption is that their testimony would have actually hurt your case, not helped it.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? The court summed it up brilliantly with a powerful Latin maxim. Dura lex sed lex. The law is harsh, but it is the law. The Supreme Court explicitly stated that Ysidoro's act, regardless of how noble the cause was, and regardless of how incredibly minuscule the diverted amount was, we're talking 4 sacks of rice and 2 boxes of sardines, still perfectly constitutes the crime of technical malversation. The law requires absolute, strict public accountability. There is literally zero room for unauthorized diversions of public property. Why? Because allowing even the best-intentioned exceptions could easily open the door to widespread abuse and corruption later on down the line. The court fully acknowledged the offense wasn't grave, which is why he just got that small fine and no prison time. But a crime was still technically committed.
This case leaves us with a really provocative thought to chew on. When you hold public office, your adherence to the strict letter of the law regarding public property is absolutely non-negotiable. Your good intentions, no matter how pure, just cannot shield you from criminal liability if you bypass the legal procedures that are set in place to protect the public purse. Accountability is simply uncompromising. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on Ysidoro v. People. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to see more structured case digests just like this one, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.